Some parents don't ask. They threaten. And what happened next ended the conversation forever. My dad didn't ask me to sign the house over to him. He announced it. In front of everyone. Like he was ordering dessert. We were halfway through dinner, plates still warm, wine glasses sweating on the table, my aunt laughing too loudly at something my stepmom said. My dad stood up with his napkin still tucked into his collar and tapped his glass with a fork. The sound cut through the room like a warning bell. Since we're all here, he said, smiling, I want to settle something tonight. I remember the exact way he looked at me when he said it. Not like a father looking at his kid. Like a man looking at a problem he planned to solve publicly. Hannah, he said, voice sweet in that fake way that always made my skin crawl. You're going to sign the house to me. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The room went still, the way rooms do when they sense blood in the water. I gave a small laugh, because my brain couldn't accept what my ears had just heard. What? I said. He shrugged like it was obvious. The deed. We'll fix it. You'll sign your share over, and I'll keep things simple. My stepmom, Gina, nodded beside him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad's smile widened. And if you don't, he added, loud enough for every cousin, aunt, and family friend to hear, then you're out of the will. Completely. You could hear the Christmas lights buzzing in the other room. That's how quiet it got. My cousin's husband actually choked on his drink and coughed into his napkin. No one laughed. No one spoke. Dad waited, enjoying it. Enjoying the way everyone looked at me like I'd been called to the principal's office. I felt my face go hot, then cold, then hot again. I looked around the table, searching for anyone to meet my eyes. My aunt stared at her plate. My uncle suddenly found the salt shaker fascinating. My younger brother Evan sat rigid, eyes fixed on his glass like he could pretend he wasn't part of this. And Gina? Gina watched me like she was watching the end of a movie she'd already spoiled for herself. My dad's voice softened, dripping with reason. Don't make this ugly, he said. We're family. That's the first lie. We're family in my father's mouth was never a comfort. It was a threat. If you're reading this and thinking, why would you even have a share of the house? Why wouldn't your dad already own it? Because my mom died. And because my dad didn't plan for me to survive long enough to grow teeth. My mom, Diane, was the stable one. The quiet kind of parent who made dinner while my dad told stories about how hard he worked and how everyone should appreciate him. She kept the whole house running while he acted like the power bill paid itself out of admiration. When she got sick, she didn't do it dramatically. She didn't make it into a performance. She quietly started organizing things. Wills. Paperwork. Accounts. My dad hated that. He called it morbid. He called it negative. He told her to stop planning for failure. But my mom didn't stop. Because my mom knew something I didn't fully understand back then. My dad didn't like being unable to rewrite reality. After she died, the house became sacred in my family, but not in the gentle way people mean when they say that. It became a symbol. To my dad, it was proof he'd built something. Proof he mattered. Proof he was still the king of something, even if the queen was gone. To me, it was complicated. I grew up there. I learned to ride a bike in that driveway. I watched my mom cry in that kitchen thinking no one could hear her. I sat on the stairs listening to my dad's voice rise, his words sharp, my mom's voice getting smaller and smaller. And after she was gone, I didn't move back in to claim anything. I moved back in because my dad called me at 2 a.m. and said, I can't do this alone. I believed him. So for 2 years, I managed everything. I handled probate paperwork. I coordinated repairs. I scheduled the roof inspection. I fought with the insurance company when the basement flooded. I paid for groceries when my dad forgot to buy food and Evan was still a teenager trying to pretend he didn't need anything. I cleaned out my mother's closet while my dad sat in the living room watching TV like the grief was a show he could mute. And every time I helped, my dad acted like I was doing what I owed him. Not what I chose. Not what I did out of love. What I owed. That's how he spoke about everything, like love was a debt and he was the collector. Still, I didn't think he'd ever say it out loud in front of witnesses. I should have known better. The first time he brought up signing things over, it was months before that dinner. He called me on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. "Hannah," he said, sounding cheerful. "I was thinking. We should simplify the deed." My stomach tightened instantly, because simplify is what controlling people say when they mean remove you. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "You're busy," he said. "You have your life. I don't want you dealing with house stuff. So you sign your share to me. Clean. Easy." I stared at my computer screen, my inbox full of emails, my pulse suddenly too loud. "Dad," I said, "I'm not signing anything without understanding it." There was a pause. Then the tone shift. "Oh, here we go," he muttered. "You're making this into something it's not." "It's a legal document," I said. "By definition, it's something." He laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You always were dramatic." I swallowed the reflex to apologize, because that reflex is how he'd controlled me for decades. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being careful." "Careful," he repeated like it was an insult. "You don't trust me?" That line. The classic. If you don't give me what I want, you're accusing me of being a bad person. I took a breath. Trust isn't the point. Understanding is. He went quiet for a beat, and I could almost hear him recalculating, deciding which button to press next. Then he sighed, heavy. "After everything I've done for you," he said, "this is what I get." I ended the call with, "We'll talk later," and told myself it was fine. Just a weird dad moment. Just stress. I kept telling myself that because the alternative was admitting my father was trying to corner me. A week later, he tried again. This time he brought Gina into it. We were in the kitchen at the house, and Gina was making coffee like she lived there, like she belonged there. She moved through the space with a confidence my mom had never needed, because my mom didn't have to prove she mattered. Gina set a mug in front of me with a smile. "Frank tells me you're worried about the deed." "Not worried," I corrected. "Cautious." Dad leaned on the counter and shook his head like I was exhausting. "She thinks I'm trying to steal from her." "I didn't say that," I replied. Gina's smile tightened. "Hannah, honey, nobody's stealing. Your father is just trying to protect the family assets." "The family assets," I repeated. Dad nodded. "Exactly. And if something happens to me, it'll all go to you kids anyway." "That's not how it works," I said carefully. "Not automatically." Dad's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I realized then he didn't actually know. Or he did, and he was banking on me not knowing. "I mean," I said, "people can change wills. People can put conditions in wills. People can." "Are you threatening me?" he snapped. I blinked. "No. I'm stating facts." Dad leaned forward, voice low. "Listen to me. You don't need to think about any of that. You need to do what's best for the family." Gina chimed in softly. "Your father has been under a lot of stress. The house is his piece." "His piece." "The house that my mother paid into. The house my mother died in. The house I managed while he fell apart." "His piece." I felt something cold move through me. But I still kept my voice calm. "If you want something changed," I said, "I'm happy to sit down with a lawyer and understand it properly." Dad's face hardened. "Lawyers," he spat. "That's what you think of your own father? You're going to bring lawyers into this?" Gina reached out and touched his arm like she was soothing a wild animal. "Frank, relax. She's just anxious. Dad pulled away. No. She's disrespectful. And that was when I understood, the document itself wasn't the point. Submission was. By the time Christmas came around, I had that familiar feeling I always got around my dad, a tightness in my chest that no amount of deep breathing could fix. The group text started early December. Not from Dad directly. From Gina. From relatives. Gina, we're doing Christmas at the house. Don't be late. Aunt Marla, your dad's been through so much. Be nice. Dad, we'll talk about the house when you get here. Don't make it a whole thing. And my brother Evan, the golden boy in training, sent me a private text that made my stomach drop. Evan, just sign it, hon. Dad's been on a tear. It's not worth it. Not worth it. That's the phrase enablers use when they want you to absorb pain so they don't have to witness conflict. I stared at Evan's message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask why he never said that to Dad. Why not worth it only ever applied to me. Instead, I typed. Me, I'm not signing anything without legal advice. He didn't respond. I told Maya, my best friend, that I didn't want to go. She didn't try to convince me to be the bigger person. She just looked at me and said, "Do you feel safe there?" That question hit me like a slap, because it forced me to admit the truth. Safe? No. But I went anyway, because I had this stupid leftover hope that maybe my father would see himself if enough people were watching. That's the other lie scapegoats tell themselves, that witnesses change predators. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just become part of the scene. Christmas dinner started normal enough. The house smelled like garlic and roast meat and that sugary candle Gina always burns. The tree was too perfect, like it belonged in a catalog. Gina greeted everyone at the door like she was the host, like the house had always been hers. Dad held court in the living room, glass of bourbon in hand, laughing too loudly, telling the same story about working his fingers to the bone to give us everything. Evan laughed at the right moments, like a loyal audience member. I slipped into the kitchen and helped because it was easier than sitting in the living room pretending I didn't feel invisible. At one point, Gina leaned in while we were plating food. "You look tired," she said softly. "I'm fine," I replied. She smiled. "Big year. Lots of changes." There was something in her tone that made my skin prickle. Then she added, like it was an afterthought, "Frank really wants closure on the house situation. Try not to stress him out tonight." There it was again. Make Dad comfortable. Even if it costs you. I didn't answer. I just kept putting carrots on a plate like my hands weren't shaking. When we finally sat down, Dad waited until everyone had food and wine. He waited until there was an audience. Then he stood up, tapped his glass, and smiled. And we're back to the moment that still plays in my head like a video I can't pause. "Hannah," he said, and the room quieted instinctively because everyone knows when a man like my father speaks, he expects silence. "You're going to sign the house to me," he said. And when I stared at him like he'd lost his mind, he delivered the threat like a punch wrapped in velvet. "Sign the house to me, or you're out of the will." Gina nodded beside him, lips pressed together in satisfied sympathy. My aunt gasped softly. My uncle muttered, "Frank." Dad raised a hand. "No. I'm done being disrespected. I'm done being questioned. I'm not going to have my own child acting like I'm the enemy in my own home." My chest burned. I wanted to yell. I wanted to cry. I wanted to flip the table. But my father thrives on reaction. He uses it as proof you're unstable. So I did the one thing he hates most. I stayed calm. I set my fork down and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said evenly. Dad's smile twitched. "What did you say?" he asked, voice sharpening. "I said I'm not signing anything tonight," I repeated. "If you want to discuss this, we can do it properly." with legal counsel. The word counsel hit the room like a dropped glass. Dad's face flushed. You are unbelievable. Gina leaned forward. Hannah, don't do this here. Don't do what? I asked, my voice still calm. Refuse to be threatened? Dad slammed his palm on the table hard enough to make silverware jump. Don't you embarrass me, he snapped. I swallowed, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then he said, louder, I sweeping the table to make sure everyone heard. Fine. You want to play hardball? You're out. Out of the will. Out of this family. He waited for me to fold. 4 tears. 4 begging. 4 apologies. Instead, I took a slow breath. And I said the one sentence that changed the temperature of the entire room. Okay, I said quietly. Then we can let the lawyer explain it. The word lawyer landed like thunder. Dad blinked. What? Gina's smile faltered. Evan's head snapped up. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and looked my father dead in the eyes. I already called her, I said. And right on cue, the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again, sharp and insistent, cutting straight through the stunned silence. No one moved. Dad stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. What lawyer? He demanded. I stood up slowly. My lawyer. Gina recovered first. She let out a brittle laugh. Hannah, this is absurd. You didn't actually. The doorbell rang a third time. Evan pushed his chair back slightly, eyes darting between Dad and me. Is this real? I told you, I said, keeping my voice level. I wasn't signing anything without legal advice. Dad's face turned a deep, angry red. You planned this. I prepared, I corrected. There's a difference. He stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. You set me up. In my own house. You threatened me, I said. In front of everyone. That was family business, he snapped. You don't bring outsiders into family business. That's funny, I replied, my hands trembling just slightly now, because the moment you threatened my inheritance, it stopped being family business and became legal business. Gina moved toward the hallway, clearly intending to intercept whoever was at the door. Frank, let me handle this. No, Dad barked. She wants a show? She's going to get one. He strode toward the front door and yanked it open. A woman stood there in a dark coat, leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Calm. Professional. Completely unimpressed by the tension radiating from the house. Good evening, she said. Ms. Patel. I'm here at Hannah's request. Dad puffed his chest. This is a private family gathering. Ms. Patel didn't blink. And this is a private legal matter involving property and coercion. I was invited. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. The room shifted instantly. People who had been willing to watch me get humiliated suddenly looked nervous. Legal reality has a way of sobering up an audience. Dad turned on me. You called a lawyer behind my back? I called a lawyer because you keep changing the rules, I said. Gina crossed her arms. This is completely unnecessary. Ms. Patel glanced at her briefly, then back to my dad. Mr. Franklin, I understand there's a dispute regarding the ownership of this property. Dad scoffed. There is no dispute. It's my house. Ms. Patel opened her portfolio calmly. According to the probate documents filed after Diane Franklin's passing, ownership is not that simple. Every head at the table snapped toward her. Evan's mouth fell open. What? My dad's jaw tightened. My wife left everything to me. Ms. Patel shook her head slightly. Your wife left her share of the house to both of her children, in equal portions, with survivorship rights contingent on specific conditions. The room went dead quiet. Gina whispered, Frank. Dad rounded on her. That's not true. Ms. Patel slid a copy of a document onto the table. It is. And it's been on record for years. Dad stared at the paper like it might explode. I felt something strange bloom in my chest. Not triumph. Not joy. Relief. Years of being told I was paranoid, dramatic, ungrateful, undone by a single piece of paper. You knew, Dad said slowly, looking at me. You knew this. I suspected, I replied. That's why I asked questions. That's why I didn't sign anything. Gina's voice sharpened. So you're trying to take his house? No, I said. I'm trying to keep mine from being taken. Ms. Patel nodded. Any attempt to coerce a transfer under threat of disinheritance, especially in front of witnesses, could be considered duress. Any document signed tonight would be legally challengeable. A murmur rippled through the table. My aunt looked pale. Frank, you can't do that. Dad slammed his hand on the table again. I can do whatever I want with my will. Ms. Patel's tone didn't change. You can change your will. You cannot extort someone into signing away property they already partially own. Evan stood up slowly. Dad, is this why you've been pushing so hard? Dad ignored him, eyes locked on me. You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me. I shook my head. You humiliated yourself. I just refused to be quiet about it. Gina's voice cracked. Frank, this is getting out of hand. No, Dad snapped. What's getting out of hand is my own daughter trying to take what I built. I finally raised my voice. You didn't build this alone. The words hung there, heavy. I kept this house running when Mom died, I continued. I handled the paperwork. The repairs. The bills. While you drank and ranted about being betrayed. Dad's face twisted. You owed me that. No, I said, my voice steady now. I didn't. Ms. Patel cleared her throat gently. Given the circumstances, my recommendation to my client is simple. No signatures tonight. All communication through counsel. And if further threats occur, we'll pursue remedies. The phrase through counsel landed like a verdict. Dad looked around the room, searching for allies. No one spoke. Not Gina. Not Evan. Not a single relative who'd watched him try to strong-arm me. His shoulders sagged just a fraction. You're choosing this over your family, he said, voice suddenly wounded, playing the last card he had. I met his eyes. No, I said. I'm choosing myself. Ms. Patel gathered her papers. Hannah, shall we? I nodded. I grabbed my coat. As we walked toward the door, Dad called after me, his voice sharp with panic. If you leave now, he shouted, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused at the threshold and turned around. You already made sure of that, I said. And I walked out. The cold hit me first. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies. Just that sharp winter air that steals your breath for a second and reminds you your body is still here, still working, even when your chest feels hollow. Ms. Patel and I stood on the porch while she pulled on her gloves, calm as if we'd just left a routine meeting instead of a family detonation. Inside, I could hear shouting now. Dad's voice carried. Loud. Furious. The same voice I'd grown up flinching from. You see what she did, he yelled. She ambushed me. Gina's voice followed, strained. Frank, lower your voice. I will not lower my voice in my own house. I let out a shaky breath. Ms. Patel glanced at me. Do you want me to stay a few more minutes? I shook my head. No. If I go back in there, I'll undo everything. She nodded once, approving. I'll be in touch tomorrow. Don't engage. Don't explain. Let the paper do the talking. She handed me a business card, firm and real in my palm. Then she walked down the steps and into the night like this was just another Tuesday. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding. Through the window, I could still see the glow of the dining room. Shadows moving fast now. Arms gesturing. My father pacing like a caged animal. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to go back in and fix it. I drove away. My phone started buzzing before I'd even made it to the end of the street. Dad, you think you've won something. Dad, you embarrassed me in front of my family. Dad, this isn't over. I didn't reply. Another message came in, this time from Gina. Gina, Hannah, your father is beside himself. This didn't need to happen like this. There it was again. Like this. As if there had been a version of this where he threatened me publicly and I smiled politely while signing my rights away. I turned my phone face down and focused on the road. By the time I got home, my hands had stopped shaking. That scared me more than anything. Because calm meant the fear had finally burned out. The next morning, the consequences arrived. Not from my dad. From reality. Ms. Patel called me at 9 a.m. sharp. I reviewed the documents more closely last night, she said. Your father's been operating under some generous assumptions. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling in front of me. Such as? I asked. Such as assuming you'd never push back, she replied. She explained it carefully, clearly. The house wasn't just his. My mom's will had locked-in protections he couldn't override without my consent. His threats to cut me out of the will didn't give him leverage over property I already partially owned. And his attempt to force a signature in front of witnesses? That was a gift, legally speaking. If he continues, she said, he exposes himself to serious problems. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me in slow waves. For years, he'd spoken like law itself bent around him. It didn't. At noon, Evan called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. There was a long pause. I didn't know, he admitted. About the house. About Mom's will. I know, I said. I thought you were just being difficult, he continued, voice thick. That Dad was right. That stung, even though I'd expected it. And now? I asked. He exhaled. Now I think he was trying to scare you into giving him control. I didn't say welcome to the club. I let the silence do the work. He's furious, Evan added. He says you betrayed him. I stared out the window. He betrayed me first. Evan didn't argue. That was new. 2 days later, Dad tried one last move. Not rage. Charm. He left a voicemail. Calm. Reasonable. Almost gentle. Hannah, he said, voice steady, we got off on the wrong foot. Let's forget the lawyer nonsense. Come by, we'll talk like adults. No ultimatums. I deleted it. Because the moment someone threatens you with homelessness and inheritance in the same sentence, talking like adults stops being an option. Ms. Patel sent a formal letter that afternoon. Clear. Cold. Unemotional. All communication through counsel. No attempts to coerce signatures. Any further harassment would be documented. That letter did what years of my pleading never had. It shut him up. A week later, I heard how the story was being retold. Dad said I'd attacked him with a lawyer. Gina said I'd misunderstood his intentions. Some relatives said it was sad how money tears families apart. No one said a word about the threat. No one mentioned the will. And for the first time, I didn't rush to correct them. Because the people who mattered had seen it with their own eyes. And the ones who hadn't were never going to believe me anyway. The power shift wasn't loud. It was quiet. He stopped calling. He stopped demanding. He stopped assuming I'd fold. And that was the real turning point. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It was unfamiliar. For weeks, my nervous system stayed on high alert, like a smoke alarm that didn't trust the fire was actually out. Every unknown number made my shoulders tense. Every email notification felt like it might be another threat dressed up as concern. But nothing came. No more ultimatums. No more sudden demands. No more reminders of what I owed. My father had finally run out of leverage. And without leverage, he didn't know how to love. The legal part wrapped itself up with the efficiency I'd always wished my family had. Ms. Patel handled everything. Clean lines. Clear boundaries. Paper that didn't care about my dad's feelings. The house stayed exactly where it was legally supposed to be. My share protected. My rights intact. More importantly, the message was unmistakable. I was no longer available for intimidation. Dad tried once to test that boundary. A month later, he sent a short email, carefully worded, asking if I'd reconsider meeting to clear the air. Ms. Patel replied for me. No meeting. No negotiation. No direct contact. I never heard from him again. Not because he'd grown. Because he couldn't win. Evan and I found an awkward middle ground. We don't talk about Dad much. When we do, it's careful. Hesitant. Like stepping across ice that might crack if you move too fast. He apologized once. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, I should have said something sooner. I accepted it. Not because it fixed everything. But because it was real. As for Gina, she vanished from my life the moment influence stopped flowing through me. No messages. No smiles. No concern. Power reveals priorities. The strangest part was how normal my life became. No chaos. No emotional ambushes. No family emergencies that were really just control drills. I stopped bracing for holidays. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head. I started sleeping through the night. One afternoon, months later, I drove past the old house. I didn't stop. I didn't feel the pull I expected. Just a quiet acknowledgement, like passing a place where something hard once happened. I realized then that the house had never been the problem. It was the stage. The real fight had always been about obedience. People still ask me sometimes if I regret it. If calling a lawyer was too much. If standing my ground was worth losing family over. I always answer the same way now. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the illusion that I had one that didn't come with conditions. And what I gained was something far rarer. Freedom without fear. Here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. If someone threatens you with inheritance, they're not talking about love. They're talking about control. And the moment they say, do this or you're out, they've already made the relationship transactional. I didn't sign the house over. I didn't beg. I didn't collapse. I let the lawyer speak. And in doing so, I learned something my father never understood. You can't scare someone who's finally willing to walk away. And once the fear is gone, the power goes with it. The threat didn't work. The signature never happened. And that was the moment the power shifted for good.